My identical twin sister has attempted to sleep with every single boyfriend I've ever had. So, I shared the one video that ended her victim act for good. Can you imagine what it's like to have your own sister steal every single boyfriend you've ever had, then watch her try to steal your husband on your wedding day? And the kicker? For 16 years, your own parents told you you were being dramatic and jealous. My story starts when I was 16. I was completely smitten with Brandon from chemistry class. We'd been dating for about 3 weeks, and everything felt perfect. Until one night I saw them. Him and my identical twin sister, Chloe, kissing in his car right outside our house. My heart just sank. When I confronted them, Chloe, ever so sweet, claimed he mistook her for me. Brandon, a spineless idiot, parroted the same lie. How do you mistake someone when they're actively kissing you back? But my parents? They bought it. Everyone did. You're identical twins, they'd say. These things happen. Don't be so dramatic. I was fuming, but what could I do? 6 months later, I was dating Tyler. Things were going great until I found Chloe's earring in his bedroom, the one she'd lost the week before. I never went in his room. She'd insisted. Tyler swore it must have fallen off me, but I don't wear dangly earrings. Never have. Sensitive ears. Chloe knew that. The next day, Tyler suddenly needed to focus on basketball and broke up with me. 2 weeks later, Chloe was dating him, only to dump him for being boring. My stomach turned. Senior year brought James. We lasted for glorious months until I came home early from work and found them in our pool. She was wearing my swimsuit, the one I'd been looking for. "He thought I was you," she cried, playing the same old card. "We're twins. It happens." James looked guilty as hell, but played along, claiming the sun was in his eyes. The sun was in his eyes while they were making out in broad daylight. My parents? You guessed it. You're overreacting. Twins share everything. It's a misunderstanding. Stop being jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was just so tired of her taking everything that was mine. College was supposed to be my escape. We went to different schools, 2 states apart. Sophomore year, I finally dated someone, Nathan, who felt different. Chloe came to visit for spring break, and after she left, Nathan started acting weird. 3 months later, I found out why. She'd given him her number, been texting him constantly, sending pictures. "Just being friendly with my future brother-in-law," she'd said when I confronted her. Nathan and I broke up. He admitted he couldn't stop thinking about her. I stopped dating for 3 whole years after that. I was just too broken. Then I met Paul at a conference. He lived 3 hours away. No social media. Perfect. We dated quietly for a year before getting engaged. I didn't tell my family until we'd set the date. A quick engagement, small wedding. 2 months before, Chloe found out. "How could you not tell me?" she wailed to our parents. "We're twins. We're supposed to share everything." I wanted to scream, "I don't want to share my husband," but I knew exactly what she meant. And she started immediately. Added Paul on LinkedIn. Found his work email. Started sending him professional questions that quickly got personal. Paul, bless his heart, showed me everything. "Your sister's kind of intense," he'd said, a wry smile on his face. That's when I told him the whole history. Every boyfriend, every betrayal, every excuse. He was horrified. "We are not inviting her to the wedding," he declared. But my parents threatened not to come if Chloe wasn't invited. Said I was tearing the family apart over ancient history, over misunderstandings, over jealousy. So Chloe was invited. I even made her a bridesmaid, just to keep her where I could see her. I assigned my cousin to basically guard her. I thought I'd been so smart. The wedding itself was beautiful. Then came the reception. Paul and I were doing rounds, thanking guests. I lost track of Chloe for about 20 minutes. My heart pounded in my chest. I found her in the coat room. Her arms were around Paul's neck, her mouth near his ear. Paul was trying to push her off without making a scene. "I'm the better twin," she was whispering, her voice laced with venom. I'm the one you really want. She tricked you. I was going to meet you first, but she sabotaged it. Paul saw me. He practically shoved her away. Your sister's lost her mind, he yelled, loud enough to cut through the music. The DJ must have heard him, because the music stopped. Everyone turned. Chloe, seeing the attention, immediately burst into tears. He came on to me, she sobbed. He said he chose wrong. He thought I was her. The exact same lie she'd used since we were 16. But this time was different. Paul had been wearing a body camera. It was his groomsman's idea, a joke, a just in case after hearing about Chloe. Paul pulled out his phone, connected to the camera app, and played the video on the venue's massive TV screen. There it was, Chloe following him into the coat room, cornering him, grabbing him, saying she was better than me, that I'd tricked him, that she could show him things I never could. The entire room watched my sister try to seduce my husband at our wedding while he repeatedly said no and tried to leave. When it ended, the silence was complete. Chloe stood there, face red, mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's edited, she finally shrieked. That's fake. He set me up. Our mother, who had stood by Chloe for so long, finally stepped forward. Chloe, enough. Even she couldn't deny video evidence. Chloe ran out, sobbing. Someone at the wedding posted it. By Monday morning, it had 2 million views. I woke up that Monday morning to my phone buzzing so hard it fell off the nightstand. The screen was frozen. Notifications stacked up behind the lock screen. 847 text messages. 1,203 missed calls. My Instagram had crashed. Facebook kept trying to load and failing. Paul's phone was doing the exact same thing. We just stared at each other, both holding our dead phones. The wedding had been 2 days ago. That video, posted Saturday night, now had over 2 million views. Half the internet had watched my sister try to sleep with my husband at our wedding. The other half had opinions about it. Paul grabbed my phone and turned it off completely, then his own. We needed quiet, needed to think, needed to process that our private family mess was now public entertainment for millions of strangers who didn't know us. He pulled me close, and we just laid there for an hour, maybe more. Neither of us said anything. What was there to say? My sister's 16-year pattern was now documented proof that anyone could watch. Every boyfriend she'd stolen, every lie she'd told, every time my parents said I was being dramatic, all of it made sense now to people who'd never even met us. Paul ordered breakfast from the diner down the street using the apartment buzzer. No phones, no internet. Just eggs and toast and coffee. We ate sitting on the floor of our living room. The TV stayed off. Every time I thought about turning my phone back on, my chest got tight. Those 847 messages weren't going to be supportive. Some would be, but plenty would be people I went to high school with, distant cousins, old coworkers, all wanting details, offering opinions, or asking if they could share the video. Paul's phone started ringing around noon, even though it was off. Took us a minute to realize it was the landline we never used, the one that came with the apartment. Paul answered and immediately held it away from his ear. I could hear my mom crying from across the room. He put it on speaker. Mom was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She kept saying I had to take the video down, that Chloe was getting death threats, that this was destroying the family, that people were calling her at work, that Dad's coworkers had seen it. Our aunts and uncles were calling, asking what was happening. I took the phone from Paul. I told her I didn't post the video. Someone at the wedding did. I didn't even know who. Could have been any of the 100 people who watched it happen. The video was out there now, and I couldn't control it. Mom went quiet for a second, then started up again about how Chloe made a mistake, how she was sorry, how this public shaming was too much. I reminded Mom, Chloe tried to seduce my husband at my wedding. She cornered him in a coat room. She said I tricked him and she was the better twin. This wasn't a mistake or confusion. This was calculated. This was what she'd been doing since we were 16. Mom went completely silent. I could hear her breathing. After maybe 30 seconds, she asked if we could all sit down and talk. Have a family meeting. Work this out like adults. I looked at Paul. He was shaking his head, but I knew we couldn't avoid this forever. I told Mom we'd meet her and Dad for coffee in 3 days, Wednesday afternoon. That would give everyone time to calm down. Give the internet time to maybe move on to the next thing. Give me time to figure out what I even wanted to say. Mom agreed and hung up. Paul immediately said we shouldn't go, that my parents would just make excuses for Chloe again. But I needed to hear what they had to say. Needed to see if anything had actually changed. For 16 years, they'd called me jealous, called me dramatic, told me I was imagining things or overreacting. Now they'd seen the proof. Everyone had seen the proof. Maybe that mattered, maybe it didn't, but I had to know. The 3 days passed weirdly. We kept our phones off except to check messages once a day. The video hit 4 million views. News sites were writing articles about it. Reddit had multiple threads. TikTok had response videos. Some random person made a timeline of all my exes based on comments people who knew us had left. It was surreal seeing my life laid out like that for strangers. Wednesday came, and I was so nervous I almost threw up breakfast. Paul drove us to the coffee shop Mom had picked. Neutral territory. Public place. Somewhere none of us could make a scene. We got there first and sat in a corner booth. My parents walked in 10 minutes later, and I barely recognized them. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were red and puffy. Mom's face was blotchy from crying. She'd aged 10 years in 3 days. They sat down across from us. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Dad started talking. He said they were sorry, that they should have believed me all those years, that they'd failed me as parents. Mom was nodding and crying again. She said they knew I was telling the truth back then, but it was easier to blame twin confusion than deal with what Chloe was actually doing. Easier to tell me I was overreacting than admit their daughter had serious problems. Dad said they'd prioritized keeping peace over protecting me. That every time they dismissed my feelings, they were choosing Chloe's comfort over my safety. That they were wrong and they were sorry. I sat there, completely shocked. In 16 years, they'd never once admitted they were wrong. Never once taken my side. Never once acknowledged that Chloe's pattern was real. Mom kept talking. Said she always knew something was off with Chloe's excuses. The mistaken identity thing never made sense. Twins don't accidentally make out with their sister's boyfriend. Don't accidentally text them for months. Don't accidentally corner them at weddings. But addressing it meant therapy and hard conversations and admitting they'd raised someone who would do these things. So they took the easy way out. Blamed biology instead of behavior. Dad said they failed me by making me feel crazy when I was seeing clearly the whole time. I wanted to feel better. Wanted to feel relieved that they finally believed me. But 16 years of being gaslit doesn't disappear because of one apology in a coffee shop. I told them I needed time to process this, that I couldn't just pretend everything was fine now, that their apology didn't erase all the times they'd chosen Chloe over me, all the times they'd made me doubt myself, all the boyfriends I'd lost because they wouldn't protect me. Mom started crying harder. Dad just nodded. They understood. They'd wait. They'd do whatever I needed. We finished our coffee in silence and left. That night, scrolling through my phone, still getting hundreds of notifications, I found Chloe's Instagram. She'd posted a long statement, talked about how the video was edited, how her family had always made her the scapegoat, how I'd been jealous of her our whole lives, how she'd tried to be a good sister, but I'd always competed with her, how this was a campaign to destroy her reputation, how she was the real victim. The comments were split. Some people supported her, saying the video could be fake, saying families are complicated, saying I was cruel for letting it go viral. Others were calling her out. posting screenshots of the full video with timestamps, asking how she explained all the ex-boyfriends. Paul showed me Reddit threads where people were actually debating if the video was manipulated, talking about deepfakes and editing software, analyzing the footage frame by frame. My stomach dropped. Khloe was doing exactly what she'd always done. Lying, playing victim, making people doubt what they'd seen with their own eyes. And some people were believing her. The next morning, Austin, Paul's groomsman, texted me asking if he could post something to help. I said yes. Within an hour, he'd uploaded the complete raw footage from the body camera to YouTube. Every single second from when Paul put it on that morning until he took it off after the reception. The file included all the metadata, timestamps, device information, location data, everything that proved the video was real and unedited. Austin added a detailed description explaining exactly how body cameras work and why it's basically impossible to fake this kind of footage without leaving digital traces. He linked to articles about metadata analysis, posted screenshots of the file properties. He made it so clear that even people who wanted to believe Khloe couldn't argue anymore. The post got shared everywhere. Tech blogs picked it up. People who'd been defending Khloe in the comments suddenly went quiet. Her Instagram posts started getting flooded with people calling her out for lying. I watched the tide turn in real time. It felt weird to feel relieved about my sister being exposed like this. But I'd been gaslit for 16 years. Watching people finally see the truth felt like breathing after being underwater too long. My phone rang around noon. It was Isa, my cousin, my guard dog from the wedding. She was crying before I even said hello. Took me a minute to understand what she was saying. Khloe's friends were sending her horrible messages, blaming her for not watching Khloe closely enough at the wedding, saying she failed at the one job she had, calling her names, threatening to ruin her reputation. Isa kept apologizing, like any of this was her fault. I told her to block every single person sending those messages, that she had zero responsibility for what Khloe did, that Khloe was a grown woman who made her own choices. Isa asked if I was sure about the blocking. Didn't want to make things worse for me. I said anyone harassing her wasn't worth keeping around anyway. We stayed on the phone for over an hour. We started talking about all the times growing up when Khloe did suspicious things that got explained away. Isa remembered Khloe stealing my homework in middle school and turning it in as her own. Our parents said it was an accident. Isa remembered Khloe spreading rumors that I was copying her style when really she'd been copying mine. Everyone believed her because she said it first. Isa remembered catching Khloe going through my room, looking for my diary. Khloe said she was just borrowing a sweater. Isa had seen it all. She felt guilty for years that she never said anything. I told her I understood. When your whole family tells you something is normal, you start believing it, even when you know better. 2 weeks crawled by. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed every boyfriend situation in my head. Brandon kissing Khloe in his car. Tyler's bedroom with her earring. James in the pool wearing my swimsuit. Nathan getting weird after spring break. All of it. Paul suggested I talk to someone. I found a therapist who had an opening. Her office was small and calm, plants everywhere. She asked what brought me in. I started with the wedding and ended up talking for 40 minutes straight about 16 years of Khloe taking everything that was mine. The therapist listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that made my chest tight. She said it sounded like I'd been gaslit by my entire family for most of my life, that they'd made me doubt my own reality so consistently that I'd stopped trusting my instincts, that being told you're crazy or jealous or dramatic when you're seeing the truth does real psychological damage. I went back twice more over the next week. In our third session, she asked if I'd ever had my own identity separate from being Khloe's twin. The question hit me harder than I expected. I sat there trying to think of a time when I was just me. Not me compared to Khloe. Not me defending myself against Khloe. Not me losing something to Khloe. Just me. I couldn't come up with anything. My whole life had been defined by being her twin, by being the one who wasn't as fun or as bold or as whatever Chloe was that day, or by being the one who was paranoid about her boyfriends, the one who couldn't share, the one who was jealous. I'd never just been myself. The therapist said that was something we needed to work on, that I needed to figure out who I was without Chloe in the picture. Paul's mom called that weekend, asked if we wanted to come for dinner. Just the four of us. Paul's parents, Lee, vet an hour away in a house that smelled like vanilla and had photos covering every wall. His mom hugged me for a long time when we got there. Dinner was quiet and normal. Afterward, we sat in their living room, and Paul's mom asked how I was really doing. Not the polite version, the real version. I told her I was tired, confused, angry, relieved, all of it at once. She nodded like she understood. Completely. Then she told me about her sister, how they'd been close growing up until her sister started competing with her over everything. Jobs, friends, men. How her sister had sabotaged her first engagement by sleeping with her fiancé. How the family had made excuses. How she'd eventually had to cut her sister out completely. She said family betrayal cuts deeper than anything else because you're supposed to be able to trust family. That losing that trust feels like losing your foundation. Paul's dad cleared his throat. He said some of their relatives had been asking intrusive questions about the video, about our marriage, about whether we were really okay, whether Paul was sure he'd married the right twin. That last one made Paul's whole body go tense. He said he was going to send a message to everyone setting boundaries, that our private life wasn't up for discussion, that anyone who couldn't respect that wouldn't be part of our lives. His dad agreed, said it was time to make it clear. I felt grateful watching Paul get protective like that, but also guilty. His family was getting dragged into my mess, my drama, my sister's chaos. Paul must have seen it on my face. He grabbed my hand and said, "We're a team now. Your problems are my problems. My family is your family. We handle things together." 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a Facebook message from someone I didn't know. Savannah Smith said she was Brandon's girlfriend, that she'd seen the video, that Brandon had told her some things, and she wanted to talk to me about Chloe. My stomach dropped. I messaged back asking what she wanted to talk about. She said it would be better in person. We met at a coffee shop downtown 2 days later. Savannah was pretty, blonde, looked nothing like me or Chloe. She ordered a latte and got right to it. She said Brandon had finally told her the truth about what happened when we were 16, that it wasn't confusion or a mistake, that Chloe had been texting him for weeks before the kiss, sending him photos, telling him I was going to break up with him anyway, saying she'd always liked him, that he was a stupid 16-year-old boy who gave into temptation, that he'd lied about it being a mistake because he was scared, and Chloe told him that's what he should say, that he'd felt guilty about it for years. Savannah said watching the wedding video made Brandon realize Chloe had been doing this my whole life, that he was just one in a long pattern, that he wanted to apologize to me directly if I was willing to hear it. I told Savannah I needed to think about it and talk to Paul first. Got home and explained everything to him while we sat on the couch. Paul said if I wanted to hear Brandon out, he'd come with me for support. I texted Savannah the next day, and we set up a meeting at a diner across town for that weekend. Brandon showed up 10 minutes early, looking nervous and older than I remembered. He sat down across from Paul and me and immediately started apologizing. Said he'd been a coward back then. Said he let me think I was crazy when I knew something was wrong. Said watching that wedding video hit him hard because he realized he'd been part of a pattern that went on for years. I sat there listening and feeling strange. Part of me wanted to stay angry. Part of me just felt tired. Brandon explained that Chloe had been texting him for weeks before that kiss happened, sending him photos, telling him I was planning to dump him anyway, saying she'd always liked him and he was wasting time with me. He was 16 and stupid and flattered that a girl was paying attention to him like that. He thought it was exciting and forbidden. When I caught them, Chloe told him to say it was a mistake that twins get confused for each other all the time, that our parents would believe it, and everything would be fine. He went along with it because he was scared and didn't want to get in trouble. He spent years feeling guilty, but convinced himself it wasn't that big a deal. Then he saw the wedding video and realized Chloe had done the exact same thing to my husband. Same lies, same excuses, same pattern. He understood then that he'd helped her get away with something that she kept doing over and over. Paul asked him why he was coming forward now. Brandon said his therapist told him he needed to make amends for things he'd done wrong if he wanted to move forward in his own life. That carrying guilt was affecting his current relationship. I appreciated the honesty, even though it stung that he was partly doing this for himself. We talked for about an hour. Brandon answered every question I had, told me details I'd never known. When he left, Paul and I sat in the parking lot for a while. I felt validated because I'd been right all along. But I also felt angry because knowing the truth didn't give me back those years of doubting myself. Didn't erase all the times my family made me feel crazy for suspecting what I knew was true. Paul held my hand and said nothing, which was exactly what I needed. The next day, I got a DM on Instagram from Tyler, asked if he could call me. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. We talked that evening. Tyler sounded different from what I remembered, more mature. He apologized right away for lying about Chloe's earring. Said she'd been pursuing him hard from the moment we started dating. Showed up at his basketball practices. Texted him constantly. Told him that twins share everything, and I wouldn't mind if they hooked up. That it was normal for twins to be with the same people. He was young and dumb and believed her. When I found the earring, Chloe told him to deny everything. Said I was the jealous twin who always tried to make her look bad. He went along with it because breaking up with me was easier than admitting what he'd done. Tyler said he'd been in therapy for anxiety, and his therapist helped him recognize patterns in his life. How he'd let people manipulate him, how Chloe had twisted his thinking back then. He apologized for being too weak to tell the truth when it mattered. Said he hoped I could forgive him someday, but understood if I couldn't. I told him I appreciated him reaching out. Didn't say I forgave him because I wasn't sure I did yet, but it helped to hear the truth. 3 days later, James sent an email, long and detailed, explained exactly how Chloe had planned the pool incident. She'd stolen my swimsuit from my room weeks earlier, texted him the day she knew I'd be at work. Told him to come over because she wanted to talk about something important. When he got there, she was already in the pool wearing my suit. Started flirting immediately. Said she'd always thought he was more her type than mine, that I was too serious and she knew how to have fun. He made out with her because he was 17 and she was in a bikini and he wasn't thinking clearly. When I came home early, Chloe immediately started the twin confusion act. Told him to play along. He did because he panicked. James apologized for being a coward. Said he'd thought about coming clean so many times over the years, but convinced himself it was too late to matter. Seeing the wedding video made him realize it always mattered. That his lie had been part of a bigger problem. I read the email twice. Felt sick thinking about how carefully Chloe had planned it. How she'd stolen my swimsuit specifically to set up that scene. How calculated the whole thing was. My parents called, asking to meet again. Said they needed to talk to me about something important. We met at the same coffee shop as before. They looked worse than last time. Mom had dark circles under her eyes. Dad's shoulders were slumped. We sat down and Mom started talking immediately. Said she and Dad had been fighting constantly since the wedding. That they were finally being honest with each other about how they'd handled things with Chloe over the years. That it was destroying them to face what they'd done. Dad took over. Said he'd always suspected Chloe had deeper problems than just twin rivalry. Noticed things when we were kids. How she'd get obsessed with taking things that were mine. How she'd lie even when the truth would have been easier. But Mom insisted they couldn't treat us differently. That it would damage Chloe's self-esteem if they acknowledged she had issues. that loving us equally meant defending her equally. So they did. Made excuses, blamed confusion, told me I was being dramatic. It was easier than dealing with the real problem, easier than getting Chloe help, easier than admitting their daughter might need therapy. Mom started crying, said she was scared she'd destroyed her relationship with me forever, that she'd chosen the easy path instead of the right one, that she'd failed me as a mother by protecting Chloe instead of protecting me. I sat there watching her cry and felt something unexpected. Sympathy. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding that they'd been stuck in their own kind of trap, that they'd made terrible choices, but maybe hadn't known how to make better ones. I was still hurt, still angry, but seeing them actually face what they'd done made something shift slightly inside me. For weeks later, I found out through someone who knew someone at Chloe's company that she'd lost her job. The video had reached her workplace somehow, and clients started asking for different account reps. They didn't trust her anymore. Didn't want someone who'd do what she did handling their business. Her boss apparently had no choice but to let her go. I heard this while getting coffee with a friend from college, and my stomach dropped when she told me. Part of me felt satisfied that Chloe was finally facing real consequences, but another part felt sick about it. I went to therapy 2 days later and spent the whole session talking about the guilt. My therapist kept asking why I felt responsible for consequences Chloe brought on herself. I kept saying I knew logically it wasn't my fault, but emotionally I felt like I destroyed my sister's life. The therapist helped me see that wanting justice and wanting to destroy someone completely were different things. That feeling guilty about her suffering didn't mean I'd done something wrong. That Chloe's actions caused this, not me showing evidence of those actions. It helped a little, not completely, but enough to breathe easier. Then Chloe started calling, from a new number. The first voicemail was her crying about losing everything. Her job, her friends, her reputation, saying she had nothing left and it was all my fault. The second voicemail, 2 hours later, was completely different. She was angry, yelling about how I'd publicly humiliated her, how I'd always been jealous and finally found a way to destroy her. The third one was apologetic again, begging me to talk to her, to help her, to make this stop. I sat on our couch, listening to all of them with Paul next to me. His face got harder with each message. When they finished, he grabbed my phone and said we were getting a restraining order. I pulled the phone back and told him I wasn't ready for that. He got frustrated, asking what it would take for me to protect myself. I explained that getting legal action against my own sister felt too extreme. We compromised. We blocked every number we could find for her, set up a document to track any contact attempts. Paul wasn't happy about it, but agreed. My therapist suggested something different the next week. She told me to write a letter to Chloe that I wouldn't send, just to process everything I was feeling without actually engaging with her. I spent 3 hours writing it at our kitchen table. Wrote about every boyfriend, every lie, every time our parents chose her over me. Wrote about the wedding and how she tried to take Paul, too. Wrote about how tired I was of her making everything about her. When I finished, I sat there reading it and realized something. I wasn't just angry at Chloe. I was sad, grieving the sister relationship I'd always wanted but never actually had. I'd spent years hoping she'd change, hoping we'd be close someday, hoping the twin bond everyone talked about would finally kick in, but it never would. That relationship didn't exist and never had. 6 weeks after the wedding, Paul and I had our first real fight about my family. We were making dinner, and he brought up my parents asking to meet again. I said I was thinking about it, and he got quiet. Then he said he was frustrated, that I still felt guilty about Chloe's consequences, that I was being too soft on my parents after everything they'd done. I felt something snap inside me. I told him he didn't understand what it was like to have your family problems exposed to millions of strangers, that I needed him to support me, not judge how fast I was processing things. He tried to explain he was just worried, but I cut him off. Said I needed support, not another person telling me I was doing this wrong. Paul apologized immediately, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He was scared I'd let my family manipulate me again. We barely talked the rest of the night. The next morning, Paul suggested couples counseling. Just one session to work through this before it became a bigger problem. I agreed because I didn't want my family issues destroying my marriage. The counselor met with us 3 days later. She let us each explain our side, then helped Paul understand that my healing wouldn't follow a straight line or his timeline, that I needed to process at my own speed. She helped me see that Paul's frustration came from wanting to protect me, not from judging me, that his fear was about losing me to my family's manipulation, not about controlling how I handled things. The session actually helped. We left feeling closer instead of further apart. We developed better ways to communicate when family stress hit our marriage. Paul promised to be more patient with my process. I promised to be clearer about what I actually needed from him instead of expecting him to guess. 7 weeks after the wedding, ISA called while I was at work. She sounded excited and confused at the same time. Said our grandmother wanted to meet with me privately. Had things to say about Chloe and my parents. I'd barely had a relationship with my grandmother. She lived 2 hours away, and we saw her maybe twice a year at holidays. I asked ISA what this was about, but she said grandmother wouldn't tell her. Just insisted she needed to talk to me alone. I told ISA I'd think about it and call her back. I called back 2 days later and said I'd meet her. I drove to her apartment the following Saturday morning. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been watching for me. Her apartment smelled like coffee and old books. She hugged me tight, then led me to her kitchen table. 2 mugs already waiting. She sat down across from me and got straight to it. Said she'd been watching this pattern since we were little kids. That Chloe showed signs of obsessive competition from early childhood. But my parents refused to get her professional help. I asked what she meant by early childhood. She said Chloe couldn't handle me getting attention for anything. If I won a school award, Chloe would fake sick the next day, so everyone focused on her instead. If I made a friend, Chloe would tell that friend lies about me until they stopped coming around. My parents called it normal sibling rivalry. She told them it wasn't normal, that Chloe needed help. They shut her down every time. My grandmother looked tired talking about this. Said she should have intervened more forcefully over the years, but my parents pushed her out whenever she criticized their parenting approach. They told her she was being dramatic, that she didn't understand twins, that she was playing favorites. So she backed off to keep the peace. But she'd been carrying guilt about not protecting me better. I sat there, holding my coffee mug, processing this. She kept going. Started sharing specific examples I'd forgotten or never knew about. Like in 3rd grade when I won the art contest at school. Came home, so excited with my painting in a frame. Left it on the kitchen counter while I went to the bathroom. Came back and found it ripped into pieces on the floor. Chloe said the cat knocked it over. We didn't have a cat. My parents bought the excuse anyway. Said accidents happen. Don't make your sister feel bad. In 6th grade, I tried out for the school play and got the lead role. Suddenly, rumors started that I'd cheated on a math test. The teacher pulled me aside, all concerned. Took weeks to prove I hadn't cheated. By then, the play was over and I'd lost the part. Found out years later that Chloe had started those rumors. Told 3 different people, knowing it would spread. The pattern was always there, just getting worse over time. I left my grandmother's apartment 3 hours later, feeling like my whole childhood had been rewritten. Drove home in a fog. Paul asked how it went. I told him everything. He got quiet for a long time, then said my family was more messed up than he'd realized. 2 months after the wedding, ISA called with gossip. Said several of Chloe's friends had stopped talking to her. They'd heard the full history, not just the wedding video. Started putting together their own experiences with Chloe. Realized she'd lied to them about a lot of things. One friend told ISA that Chloe had tried to kiss her husband at a party last year. She'd brushed it off as drunk confusion at the time. Now she was rethinking everything. Another friend remembered Chloe constantly competing with her, trying to one-up every achievement. The pattern wasn't just with me. Even her support system was falling apart as people recognized her behavior. 3 days later, I got an email from Nathan. My college ex said he'd been thinking about everything since the wedding video went viral. Wanted to explain how Chloe's texting manipulation had affected him and apologized for not being strong enough to resist. He was engaged now, getting married in 2 months. Wanted to clear his conscience before his own wedding. The email was long, detailed. He explained how Chloe had made him feel special, chosen, how she'd sent photos that got progressively more personal, how she'd told him I was planning to break up with him anyway, so he might as well have fun. He believed her because she was my twin, so how would she not know? He felt terrible about it for years. Realized after seeing the wedding video that he'd been manipulated the same way she'd manipulated everyone else. He hoped I could forgive him someday. I sat with that email for 2 days before responding. Kept it short, thanked him for the apology, and wished him well with his wedding. Told him I appreciated him being honest about what happened. It felt good to receive these acknowledgments from my exes. But I also realized that collecting apologies wouldn't undo the damage or give me back those years. Nathan's apology didn't change the 3 years I'd stopped dating, because I thought something was wrong with me. Brandon's apology didn't fix the 16-year-old girl who thought she was crazy for suspecting the truth. The apologies mattered, but they couldn't rewrite history. My parents called the next week asking for another meeting. This time, they suggested something different. Family mediation with a professional. They'd been seeing a counselor who recommended bringing in someone neutral to facilitate difficult conversations. Someone who could help us communicate without everything exploding. I talked it over with Paul. He thought it was worth trying as long as the mediator was actually neutral and not just another person trying to make me forgive and forget. I agreed to 1 session. See how it went. The first mediation session happened 2 weeks later. Small office with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. The mediator was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She established ground rules right away. No interrupting, no name-calling, no storming out. Everyone gets to share their perspective without being attacked. Then she asked each of us to explain our side. My parents went first. Mom talked about how they'd always tried to treat us equally, how they thought dismissing the boyfriend situations was protecting both of us from conflict. Dad admitted they'd taken the easy path instead of the right one, that they'd been conflict avoidant and chose comfort over truth. My turn came next. I talked about 16 years of not being believed, about being called jealous and dramatic when I was actually being gaslit, about how their dismissal had affected my self-worth and made me question my own reality. The mediator listened to everything without interrupting. Then she asked if I was willing to work toward rebuilding a relationship with my parents. I said yes, but that it required consistent changed behavior from them, not just words, that I needed to see actual follow-through over time, and that Chloe could not be part of my life right now. That boundary was non-negotiable. Mom's face crumpled when I said that. She started crying, said she understood, but it was hard because Chloe was struggling so much. The mediator stepped in, asked Mom what she was feeling. Mom admitted she felt torn between her daughters, felt like she was abandoning Chloe by supporting me. Dad spoke up then, said they needed to respect my needs for once instead of prioritizing Chloe's feelings, that they'd spent 16 years putting Chloe first. And look where that got everyone. Mom looked at Dad like he'd betrayed her. The tension between them filled the room. The mediator helped them navigate it, asked them to consider that supporting me didn't mean abandoning Chloe, that Chloe was an adult responsible for her own choices and consequences, that healthy boundaries were good for everyone, including Chloe. The session ended with homework assignments for everyone and another appointment scheduled in 2 weeks. 10 weeks after the wedding, I pulled into my parents' driveway for our regular mediation session. Paul was with me like always. We walked up to the front door, and I knocked twice before going in. Mom called from the living room that they were ready. I turned the corner and froze. Chloe was sitting on the couch. She looked terrible. Her face was thin, and her clothes hung loose on her frame. She'd lost at least 15 pounds. Her hair needed washing, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Mom stood up quickly and started explaining that Chloe had something important to say. Dad looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. Chloe stood up, her hand shaking. She looked right at me with red eyes. She said she needed to talk to me, that I was destroying her life and I had to stop. Her voice cracked on the last word. Paul stepped closer to me, and I felt his hand on my lower back. I took a breath and kept my voice steady. I told Chloe that she destroyed her own life, that she made choices for 16 years, that I wasn't responsible for the consequences, finally catching up to her. Chloe's face crumpled, and she started crying hard. She said I posted the video to ruin her. I reminded her that someone else posted it, not me. She said I could have stopped it, could have asked them to take it down. I said no. I couldn't control what other people did with evidence of her behavior. She dropped back onto the couch and put her face in her hands. Her whole body shook with sobs. Mom moved toward her, but I held up my hand. I told my parents this was exactly why I needed boundaries. That Chloe showing up here when she knew I'd be coming was manipulative. Dad nodded slowly and said I was right. Mom looked torn but didn't argue. I told Chloe that when she was ready to take real responsibility without blaming me, we could talk, but not before. Paul and I left. Mom didn't follow us out. In the car, my hands were shaking. Paul drove and kept one hand on my knee. He didn't say anything, just let me process. When we got home, I called my therapist and asked for an emergency session. She had an opening the next morning. I spent that night replaying the confrontation in my head, wondering if I'd been too harsh, wondering if I should have stayed. The next day, my therapist listened to the whole story. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said, Chloe's breakdown didn't obligate you to forgive her or resume contact. That real accountability would involve Chloe getting professional help and accepting responsibility without blaming you. She said, what happened at your parents' house was Chloe trying to manipulate you through guilt. The weight and the tears were designed to make you feel sorry for her. My therapist reminded me that I'd spent 16 years being manipulated, and that recognizing it now was progress. 3 months after the wedding, my parents called and asked to meet for coffee. Just them, not Chloe. We met at a place near their house. Dad ordered for everyone while Mom fidgeted with her napkin. When Dad sat down, he said they had news about Chloe. She'd started seeing a therapist who works with personality disorders. They'd been to 3 sessions so far. Mom said Chloe seemed to be taking it seriously, that the therapist was helping her understand her patterns. Dad added that they were cautiously hopeful. I listened, but didn't say much. Paul asked what kind of work Chloe was doing in therapy. Mom said the therapist was helping her identify why she felt compelled to compete with me, that there were deeper issues they were exploring. I wanted to believe it, but I'd seen Chloe perform for new audiences before. Teachers, boyfriends, counselors at the school. She was good at showing people what they wanted to see. I told my parents I was glad she was getting help, but that I needed more than 3 sessions before considering any contact. Dad said he understood. Mom's face fell, but she nodded. The next week, Paul surprised me with a trip to the coast. He'd booked a small cottage right on the beach for 4 days. We packed quickly and drove out Friday morning. The cottage was perfect. Tiny kitchen, big windows facing the water, a deck with 2 chairs. We spent the first day just walking on the beach and eating takeout. I barely thought about Chloe or my parents at all. It felt strange at first, like I was forgetting something important. But by the second day, I relaxed into it. We collected shells and watched the sunset, made breakfast together, and read books on the deck. On the third night, we were sitting outside with wine, and Paul asked what kind of family we wanted to create together. I'd been thinking about it, but hadn't said anything out loud. I told him I wanted honesty. No pretending things were fine when they weren't. No avoiding hard conversations to keep the peace. Paul agreed and said he wanted healthy boundaries, that we'd decide together who was allowed in our lives and who wasn't, that we wouldn't let anyone guilt us into relationships that hurt us. We talked for hours about what our future would look like, how we'd handle holidays and family events, how we'd protect our kids someday from toxic family patterns. It felt good to plan something together instead of just reacting to crisis after crisis. When we got back home, Dad texted asking if I wanted to get coffee, just the two of us. We met at a cafe downtown on Tuesday morning. He looked tired but more settled than at our last meeting. He told me he'd been doing his own therapy work, that his therapist was helping him understand why he enabled Chloe for so long. He said he was conflict avoidant, that he always took the path of least resistance instead of doing what was right. He apologized for not protecting me, for choosing his own comfort over my well-being. I could see he meant it. His voice was steady and he looked me in the eye. I told him I appreciated the apology and the work he was doing. He asked if he could take me to dinner once a month, just us, separate from the bigger family stuff. He wanted to rebuild our relationship, one-on-one. I thought about it for a minute, then I said yes. I could see he was genuinely trying to change his patterns. Mom was harder. Our mediator helped us work through her guilt about Chloe's situation. Mom kept saying she felt like she was abandoning Chloe by supporting me. The mediator asked her why supporting one daughter meant abandoning the other. Mom didn't have a good answer. Over several sessions, Mom slowly started accepting that she could support me without giving up on Chloe. That healthy boundaries weren't punishment. That protecting me didn't mean she didn't love Chloe. It was slow progress, and sometimes she backslid, but she was trying. 14 weeks after the wedding, Paul and I decided to host a dinner party. We invited Austin and ISA and 3 other close friends, people who'd supported us through everything. I spent all day cooking while Paul cleaned and set up the table. When everyone arrived, the apartment filled with noise and laughter. Austin brought stories about Paul from college that made everyone crack up. ISA talked about her new job and asked about our honeymoon plans. Our friend made jokes about the wedding video going viral. It felt amazing to just laugh and enjoy people who genuinely cared about us. No hidden agendas or manipulation. No walking on eggshells or managing someone else's feelings. Just real friendship and support. After everyone left, Paul and I cleaned up together. He wrapped his arms around me from behind while I washed dishes. He said he was proud of how far we'd come. That watching me set boundaries and build a real life had made him love me even more. I leaned back against him and felt genuinely content for the first time in months. ISA had pulled me aside while grabbing her coat to leave. She said Chloe had been texting her and a few other cousins, asking how I was doing and if I ever mentioned her. ISA looked uncomfortable bringing it up, but wanted me to know Chloe was at least respecting the no-contact rule by not trying to reach me directly. I felt this wave of relief wash over me. The boundary was actually holding. Nobody was trying to guilt me into breaking it or sneaking messages through. It wasn't easy for anyone, but people were respecting what I needed. After everyone left that night, I told Paul about what ISA said and he squeezed my hand. For months after the wedding, I sat in my therapist's office talking about something that felt weird to even say out loud. I had hobbies again, real ones that I'd picked for myself. I joined a pottery class on Tuesday nights and started going to a book club that met at the library. Made friends there who only knew me as myself, not as Chloe's twin or the girl from that viral video. My therapist asked me to describe who I was without mentioning my sister at all. I talked for 20 minutes about the things I liked and the person I was becoming and didn't reference Chloe once. When I noticed that I'd done it, I actually teared up a little. My therapist smiled and said that was real progress. That week, Paul told me to pack a bag for the weekend, but wouldn't say where we were going. He'd taken Friday off work, and we drove 3 hours to this little cabin by a lake. No cell service, no internet. Just us in the woods and the water. On Saturday morning, we sat on the dock with coffee, and he told me he was proud of me. That watching me set boundaries and build my own life had made him love me even more. That he knew the past 4 months had been the hardest possible start to a marriage, but we'd survived it together. I leaned against him and watched the sun come up over the water. We spent the whole weekend hiking and cooking meals together and just existing without any family drama or stress. On the drive home Sunday, I realized something that made me actually smile. I was happy. Not just relieved that the wedding disaster was behind us or validated that people finally believed me about Chloe. Actually, genuinely happy with my life. My family situation wasn't fixed, and probably never would be completely. Mom still struggled sometimes, and Chloe was still out there dealing with her own mess. But I'd built something real with Paul. I had my own friends and my own hobbies and my own identity separate from being anyone's twin. The viral video had exposed Chloe's pattern to the world, but the real victory was smaller and more personal. I'd finally stopped letting her define me. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it hurt? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your experiences.